Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is historian and professor at American University, Allan Lichtman. Allan, thank you so much for joining me once again.
My great pleasure.
We sit here 24 hours after a really historic, unprecedented move from President Biden. He dropped out of the 2024 presidential race yesterday. Today, there's many questions of what's going to happen next. You, between the debate and yesterday, have been calling for him to stay in the race. Democrats rally around him. So I am curious, what's your reaction to the news?
Well, I have been calling for him to stay in the race because of the success of my prediction system, the 13 keys to the White House, which tap into the structure of how elections really work as votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. And the way it works, if 6 or more keys fall against the incumbents, they're predicted losers, otherwise predicted winners. With Biden in the race, the Democrats ticked off 2 of my keys, incumbency and party contest. That meant 6 or more would have to fall to predict their defeat. But now we know they've lost the incumbency key. And so it is now critical for the Democrats that they don't lose the contest key. I am astounded at the foolishness of respected journalists and pundits like the editorial board of the Washington Post trying to push the Democrats into a big party brawl at the convention, which would cost them a second key, the contest key. That means of the remaining 11, only 4, not 6, would have to fall to predict their defeat. But if they avoid the contest, then although they lost incumbency, it would still be 5, not 4. And just look at the pattern of history if you don't like the keys. Since 1900, the White House party has never, I repeat, never won re-election when there's an open seat with no incumbent running and a major contest for the nomination. These foolish critics are pushing the Democrats, at least trying to, I don't think they'll succeed, I hope not, into recreating the same conditions of 2016 that led to the election of Donald Trump in the first place.
Do you think it's the media pushing, or do you think it's Democrats behind the scenes, like reportedly Nancy Pelosi, reportedly President Obama?
I hope Pelosi and Obama grow a spine and grow a brain and get behind Harris. Otherwise, they are pushing the Democrats closer to defeat than they need to be. You know, Democrats do have a habit of snatching defeat from the jaws of a possible victory. And Pelosi and Obama need to understand, even if they don't want to deal with the keys, need to understand the clear verdict of history that unless you unite the party behind Harris, you are pushing the Democrats into a situation where the White House party has never been reelected in over 120 years. Why in the world would you do that? Moreover, this notion, if we leave it open, the Democrats will certainly, select a quote unquote electable candidate. Well, they've done that many times. Selected so-called electable, experienced, proven candidates like former Vice President Walter Mondale in 1984, the great Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis in 1988, the eminent Senator John Kerry in 2004, the former First Lady, U.S. Senator, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in 2016. And you know where I'm going with this, right? Every one of those electable candidates lost.
Yes, but you named, everyone that you named was a Democrat who did not win the presidency. So as we sit here right now, we are 24 hours out from that announcement. Vice President Kamala Harris is not the nominee. Some are endorsing her. Many Democrats are endorsing her. Others withholding that endorsement, like former President Obama. As we sit here right now where the chips have fallen, do Democrats have a chance at winning?
Oh, absolutely, of course. Let's presume Democrats suddenly grow a spine and a brain and unite behind Harris. Let's look at my key system. That would put the Democrats down 3 keys right now. the mandate key because of losses in the midterm elections in the US House, the incumbent charisma key because Harris is not a FDR, and of course the incumbency key. That means three more keys would have to fall to predict their defeat. And right now I only see four shaky keys: third party, social unrest, foreign/military failure and success. Three of those keys would have to fall to predict the Democrats' defeat. Certainly possible, but not necessarily highly likely. But if the party foolishly plunges into a nomination fight, you then lose another key, the contest key. You're down four keys, and only two shaky keys would have to fall to predict their defeat. You also push the Democrats into a situation where the White House party has never won. Whereas, when you have an open seat, it's not great for the White House party. But if you avoid a contest, you still have a decent chance of winning, as we saw with Herbert Hoover in 1928 and George H.W. Bush in 1988.
I want to talk about the Republican nominee, and that is former President Donald Trump. Since you and I have last spoken, he did survive an assassination attempt. Before, you have said he is not considered a charismatic opponent. Do you think the events of the past few weeks have changed that?
Absolutely not. He still appeals to a narrow base. I thought he had a chance to take advantage of the assassination attempt to indeed become a broadly appealing candidate with his convention speech. And for the first 25 minutes or so, I thought maybe he was on his way to doing that. Then for the next hour plus, he blew it. This was now the old ranting and raving Trump, dark, sinister, divisive, inflammatory, a speech filled with at least 20 lies, according to the fact checkers. So whatever chance he had, Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and he really can't change who he is.
I know that this isn't a key, but because this is a really historic moment, it's unprecedented. How much do you think VP pick matters? Let's say the nominee ends up being Vice President Kamala Harris. Who she picks as a running mate, does this sway voters' minds? Does this impact the keys at all?
It does not impact the keys at all. The keys are the Northern Star of politics. They remain fixed. Every 4 years, someone comes to me and says, this year is unprecedented. You have to change your keys. We have an African American running. America's not ready to elect an African American. We have a woman running. We have social media. We have the Access Hollywood tape. And my answer is always, you can't change a model on the fly. That's a recipe for error. Moreover, the keys are extremely robust. Developmentally, they go all the way back to 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln, when women couldn't vote. Most African Americans were enslaved. We had no polls, no automobiles, no jet planes, no radio, no television. So the keys have survived vastly greater changes in our economy, our society, our demography, and our politics than anything we see today. We tend to look at things, unfortunately, in the lens of the immediate present. I think my role as an historian and predictor is to look at the broader picture.
As your role as a historian, is this moment, I know the word unprecedented has really been thrown around a lot in this election in the past really 8 years. Does this time in history really remind you of any other time?
Sure. There's never exact parallels in history, but there are certainly what we call family resemblance, just as children don't look exactly like their parents, but you can see the resemblance. One example is 1968, when the sitting president, who had previously won election in a landslide in 1964, Lyndon Johnson, withdrew during the primary process in March. And then you had this brutal conflict within the Democratic Party, including an assassination, not an attempt, but a successful assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, who was overwhelmingly likely to be the Democratic nominee. You had a big brawl for the Democratic nomination. You had chaos at the convention. And lo and behold, despite a booming economy, the economy of the 1960s, one of the best economies we've had, we got Richard Nixon, who prolonged the Vietnam War for 5 years and almost killed off our democracy. In fact, if the current Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity had been in effect in the 1970s, Nixon would have gotten away scot-free with Watergate, and our democracy would have died 50 years ago, perhaps. So be very wary of, having a divided party, having chaos. The lessons of 1968 are very clear.
So, how do you think the Democratic Party of 2024 then applies those lessons of 1968? Because within the past few weeks, really since that debate, there has been a sharp divide of Democrats who were calling for President Biden to step out, other Democrats who were calling for him to step in or stay in, both factions of the party calling the other ones spineless. I mean, how do they come together, especially with an election in less than 4 months?
Yeah, I was appalled by the spectacle of the Democratic Party trashing their incumbent president right out in the open, and the nominee not by Jamie Raskin or Adam Schiff in Congress, but by the voters of the Democratic Party in the primaries. I had never seen anything like that, and I've studied politics from the founding to the present. Why do I think the Democrats may finally grow a spine and a brain and come together? Sheer political fear. Politics is like Wall Street. It runs on two things, greed and fear.
And Allan, before I let you go, I am curious to hear your side of this argument. Some Republicans have said that for Democrats being called what they call themselves as the party of democracy, Joe Biden had the primary votes here, and they feel that they're replacing him with someone who voters did not select in the primary. What's your argument to that?
Well, I think they have a point. I think this was not a grand exercise in democracy, but it pales in comparison to Donald Trump's threat to democracy, he organized an insurrection. He's a multiple convicted felon. He's a civilly convicted sexual assaulter, colloquially rapist. I can go on and on. And he promised to govern like his buddy Viktor Orban in Hungary, which means snuffing out the political opposition. And unfortunately, to my friends like you in the media, snuffing out the free press. So yeah, but this is a bit, much worse than the pot calling the kettle black. Come on. The party of authoritarianism has a point, but only to a small point.
Allan, when I was lucky enough to speak with you a few weeks ago, you suggested a plan B if President Biden were to step down, and that would be he resign the presidency immediately and have Vice President Kamala Harris become the president. Do you think that would happen, A? And B, do you still think that's the best plan forward?
I always thought that was the best plan. At least so far, it's not going to happen. But I'm hoping, for the Democrats' sake, that they adopt the other half of my plan B, which was to form a consensus around the nomination of Harris. If they do that, they've at least listened to me 50%, and I consider that pretty good.
And when you're looking between now and the convention come August, what are you looking out for the most in terms of these 13 keys?
Yeah. As I said, there are 4 shaky keys: third party, social unrest, foreign/military failure, and success. So I'm looking to see whether there's an explosion of social unrest at the convention like we saw in 1968. I don't expect that, but I'm waiting to see. I'm waiting to see if RFK Jr., like George Wallace in 1968, stabilizes in the polls at 10% or more. And what I'm particularly looking at, which is something that Biden might be able to achieve and help his party against the obstructionism of PM Netanyahu in Israel, could he conceivably broker a ceasefire and a release of the hostages? That could turn one of my foreign policy/military policy keys in favor of the Democrats. I've been asked for months, what could Biden do to win re-election? And my answer is always govern well. That's the message of the keys. It's governance, not campaigning, that counts.
Professor Allan Lichtman, I appreciate your insights today. Thank you for the conversation. You're welcome back anytime.
My pleasure. Thank you for a great interview.